Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump bringing DC's police force under federal control and vowing a crackdown on violent crime. What the changes mean for the nation's capital? Will President Trump's latest efforts to reduce crime make a meaningful impact? We discussed the issue with the panel. President Trump previewing his upcoming meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, what he says about the future of Ukraine's territory. Nvidia agreeing to give the U.S. government revenue from its chip sales to China, what the deal means for the Trump administration. Texas Democrats remain out of state, delaying a vote on redrawing the state's congressional districts. Governor Abbott says he will call one special session after the next until they return. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended his nation's planned military takeover of the Gaza Strip.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. Hope everyone had a great weekend. President Trump today taking the step of placing Washington, D.C.'s police force under direct federal control. And this is part of a sweeping effort to curb violent crime in the nation's capital. We'll now go live to NTD's Mari Otsu at the White House, who was just at the president's press briefing this morning. Okay, Mari, good afternoon. Please tell us, what is the latest from the briefing?
Good afternoon to you too, Don. It was absolutely packed at the briefing this morning, with both President Trump and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying that it was the most crowded briefing they had ever seen. And right off the bat, President Trump announced he's officially placing the D.C. Metro Police under federal control directly and sending over 800 National Guardsmen to counter violent crime in the capital. Take a look.
This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States. I understand a lot of you tend to be on the liberal side, but you don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed. You want to have safety in the streets, and you don't have that now. The murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher.
Trump also added that he may deploy active duty military if it's needed. And at the briefing, we were given this fact sheet showing the 2024 murder rate per 100,000, with Washington, D.C. rates here, the red line, double that of Bogota, the capital of Colombia. And while Democratic leaders cite numbers showing that D.C. crime rate has been coming down, the White House actually highlighted the fact that a D.C. police commander was suspended last month for manipulating crime data. Also included are photos of criminals here from the D.C. streets this weekend who were removed. This man was arrested for possession of a controlled substance, and this man was charged with possession of a firearm, possession of unregistered ammunition, and the intent to distribute narcotics and carrying a pistol without a license. Don?
And Mari, Judge Pirro made some comments today as well about cracking down on violent crime in the nation's capital. What changes is she calling for, and what's behind this push?
Yeah, President Trump said that in addition to more police presence, what's actually needed is a change in rules and regulations. And so he was joined in the briefing by U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro. Judge Pirro vowed to change the D.C. laws that give lenient punishments to young people committing violent crimes. Take a look.
I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are. They can be in DuPont Circle, but they know that we can't touch them. Why? Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I can't arrest them. I can't prosecute them. They go to family court and they get to do yoga and arts and crafts. Enough. It changes today.
In addition to ramping up the punishments, President Trump is also pushing to change the no cash bail policies in cities like Chicago, New York, and D.C. Trump says as Republicans hold the majority in Congress, they can vote to change the statutes on this. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Mari, thanks for the update. As President Trump targets homelessness and violent crime in the nation's capital, how safe do D.C. residents feel, and do they support the decision to increase federal police presence? NTD's Sam Wong reports.
You feel safe being in the city?
Yes, yeah, I feel incredibly safe in the city.
Depends on where and depends on the timing.
How about Navy Yard?
Navy Yard is not necessarily a place that I would feel safe at all different hours of the day.
There's a couple times I've been in the morning, shootings down at Harris Teeter. Safety officer got shot or something like that, and they had all the streets blocked off.
The city has a history of, crime. I don't think it's any significantly different than any other city, on a per capita basis.
And I know there's been concern online about especially these scooters, e-bikes, that they're running those down sidewalks and into crowds. And so, but I personally feel safe.
There's been a couple of times during ball games that stuff has gone down. I haven't been directly there to see it, that I know has happened right here while I've been down at games before. I still feel reasonably safe walking around here. I mean, I don't know if that's going to be for everybody. I'm a pretty big guy. That might not be what everybody's thinking walking around here.
President Trump has ordered to increase the presence of federal law enforcement here in D.C. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that adequately addresses the safety issue here?
No, I don't think so.
Sure do. More the better.
I wouldn't say more or less. No, I feel fine. But this is a safe neighborhood when I'm in it.
I can see if he's truly concerned about safety, I can see the value behind it. I just think that overall the city of D.C. has a much more systemic issues with their police department than that.
I want to feel comfortable going around a neighborhood and not having to worry about safety, but also not having to worry about having a police officer on every corner. It's very intimidating.
I like that his positive steps toward keeping the people of D.C. safe. There has to be law and order, 100%.
And joining us now to discuss President Trump's efforts to reduce crime and the beautification of the U.S. Capitol is Nils Grevelius, a Los Angeles-based private detective. So good afternoon, Nils. Trump says he's putting the D.C. Metropolitan Police under federal control. To start off, maybe you can give us your assessment. What's this impact? What is the impact?
Well, Mr. Ma, good afternoon. I think it's a very wise idea. The Democrats have played a long game here, Mr. Ma, where they want 100% ownership of the D.C. political entity, yet 0% responsibility for what occurs there. And the GOP has gone along with this for too long, and I think it's a wise move. The city doesn't just need to be beautified, it needs to be cleaned out. Judge Pirro talked about holding municipal judges accountable, and AG Bondi talked about tracking every single case. I think we need to out these judges and tie them to the political structure that has created a situation with zero consequences for anybody other than normal people. The criminal element are free to do precisely as they please.
So what do you say to the argument that, according to official data, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department data, that crime is actually down, violent crime down 26%?
It can't be trusted. They just had to suspend a D.C. police official for faking statistics under political pressure. I don't trust it. We're seeing a lot of violence, a lot of dereliction, that sort of thing. It comes from drug gangs and other things. We've got these vast bum camps all over our capital, and it needs to be cleaned up and cleaned out. Let me pose to you, Mr. Ma, if we had marauding gangs of Klansmen running around Washington, D.C., the Democrats would want it cleaned up immediately. We need to do this. D.C. has to be cleaned up, and this is inexcusable. People are suffering and dying. Even the people they claim that they're trying to help and protect and that sort of thing are suffering mightily under this history and regime.
So federal control can only last about 30 days before Congress gets involved. Do you think that's enough time to change the situation with federal involvement? What happens after that?
I think it's enough time to flush every shade of gray from the room, Mr. Ma, and I think that's the primary purpose of President Trump's action. is to put the Democrats on notice to either cooperate or get the hell out of the way. Congress can act after 30 days, and Congress has acted in the past. In the 1930s, there were a bunch of veterans of World War I who occupied Washington, D.C., called the Bonus Marchers. And President Hoover sent the U.S. Army out to break up the encampments. There's a history of this, and no one can say that this is unprecedented, which is a preferred word in media, but this can be done, and it must be done.
Okay, talk to us about the long-term policing efforts versus deploying National Guard or military in reducing crime.
Well, you have to identify the criminal element. Typically, 2% of the population is committing 99% of the criminal behavior, drug dealing, property crimes, breaking into automobiles, assaults, that sort of thing. And you imprison that 2% or get them on the road to rehabilitation, whichever works best, and that solves your problem. The number goes down. But by having a consequence-free city, it has just escalated, and I do not trust the current leadership of that city to provide honest statistics as to criminality, dereliction, drug addiction, fentanyl, anything. You can't trust them.
Where do you think the root cause of crime in D.C. comes from? And do you think President Trump's measures today addresses the root cause of crime?
The root cause of crime in Washington, D.C. is criminals, Mr. Ma. There are people who like committing crimes. They're psychopaths or they're drug addicts. They have to support their drug habit, and so they steal, they maraud. They deal drugs to support their own habit. They murder each other over drug territory, things like that. Yes, what President Trump is proposing heads it in the right direction. Let's see how the execution works out. So far, the people that he has appointed to his cabinet have been pretty effective. Many of them are very skilled at reducing criminality in urban areas. Let's give it a try. Nobody else has.
What do you think about the removal or reduction of no cash bail? Is that going to affect crime rates in a positive way?
Yes, I think it's very important when somebody's freedom is in hock to capital. They have every reason to show up in court and participate in the process. If they're not invested in any way, they're not hurting in any way. You have to tie them to it, and you have to tie their families to it too, because crime is often a family problem, where you have whole families of people involved in criminality, and it's intergenerational. That's one of the other situations that's occurred in a consequence-free society. You have veteran criminals out on the street intermixing with juvenile delinquents, and they're not making the juvenile delinquents better citizens. They're making them into more skilled criminals.
Okay, just one last question. How do you think the local leadership is going to interact with federal involvement, for example, DC's mayor?
Well, Muriel Bowser, the mayor, Mr. Ma, so far has made positive noises about most of this. She wasn't too happy about the idea of the National Guard. I'll point out that the D.C. establishment loved it when Joe Biden put the National Guard out after the January 6th situation. So I think that the D.C. people have every incentive in the world to participate in cleaning up their city. But there will be political elements that will try to claw back power. For every measure that Donald Trump takes, the Democrat establishment works hard to deteriorate his authority, his orders, et cetera, in the court system. Trump knows this, and he's prepared for it. And that's what I mean about flushing every shade of gray from the room. Where there's some ambiguity as to federal authority, he removes that ambiguity by acting.
Well, all right, Nils, it was good to talk to you today. Thank you for your time.
It's my sincere pleasure. Have a safe day, Mr. Ma.
You as well. Next, soldiers in a law enforcement role. A landmark trial kicks off today on that subject. It centers on the Trump administration's use of National Guard troops to support its deportation efforts and quell protests and protect officers in Los Angeles. The three-day non-jury trial is being heard by District Judge Charles Breyer in San Francisco. It will examine if the government violated a 19th century law when it deployed troops to Los Angeles in June. Los Angeles suffered days of unrest and protest in relation to immigration raids. The Trump administration deployed the California National Guard to deal with the unrest. The administration denies troops were used in civil law enforcement. It says they were protecting federal property and ICE agents. California filed a lawsuit against the president over the move. Then a federal appeals court ruled that the president could maintain control of California's troops. Coming up, an explosion at a U.S. steel plant near Pittsburgh leaves dozens injured. Rescue efforts are underway after the blast kills one and leaving 2 people missing. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they can do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way. No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. Call now to lock in your rate and save big. Call 800-522-0122, 800-522-0122.
The Design Studio by Mathis Home is where your home decorating dreams come to life, with heirloom quality pieces for every room in your house. Right now, get the lowest prices of the year on top designer brands like Hooker, Universal, and Bernhard. We're the only place with designer furniture in stock, with complimentary delivery and design services. For the latest in luxury and style, visit us now for exclusive discounts. Now through Labor Day, only at the Design Studio by Mathis Home.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The walls surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this old girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked, because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic. So I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
Heavy thunderstorms hit parts of the Midwest and plains over the weekend, triggering flash flooding. Wisconsin experienced record-breaking rainfall, shattering a 2-day precipitation record. Milwaukee County declared a state of emergency Sunday. Flooded roads and stranded vehicles prompted dozens of water rescues. Milwaukee's fire chief detailed response efforts. Listen.
We have a tremendous amount of recovery work to begin here. We've got a large number of people who've been displaced from their homes, whose homes are going to need a tremendous amount of work to get them back to livable. And so that's what we're beginning to focus on right now. We've got a very, very comprehensive multi-jurisdictional team.
The region's beloved Wisconsin State Fair was forced to shut down early on Saturday. Organizers canceled its final day Sunday after rains flooded the fairgrounds just outside Milwaukee. A rain gauge in northwest Milwaukee recorded over 14 inches of rain in 24 hours. If confirmed by the National Weather Service, rainfall would surpass Wisconsin's previous record of 11.9 inches in 1946. Meanwhile, police say 3 people were shot and wounded in New York Times Square over the weekend. Authorities say the victims, an 18-year-old woman, a 19-year-old man, and a 65-year-old man, are in stable condition. A 17-year-old suspect identified as Jaden Clark was arrested early Saturday morning shortly after the shooting. Police say the shooting followed an argument between Clark and one of the victims inside a nearby restaurant. It's not yet known if the suspect and the victims knew each other. Clark is now being held on a $200,000 bail and faces 3 counts of attempted murder. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says his department will use money from President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill to modernize outdated air traffic control equipment. Duffy made the statement after visiting one of the oldest air control towers in the nation's Duluth, Minnesota.
It's important to come and see the facilities that are used across the country. And there's nothing like a picture to explain what's happening and what you have going on in Duluth. This is a facility that was built back in the 1950s. And if you see some of the footage from the tower, it looks like there's 1950s, 1960s, 1970s technology in this tower. Now, it's not all that we need. We need $31.5 billion. But the $12.5 billion that we do have is going to go to new radar, new voice switches, new radios, new telecom.
Duffy shared photos of outdated equipment inside the tower. Duffy has said a brand new air traffic control system should take 3 to 4 years to complete. A new Instagram feature that shares users' location with followers is drawing pushback on Capitol Hill. A bipartisan pair of lawmakers raised concerns to CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Senators Marsha Blackburn, a Republican, and Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, warned the new map feature could make children more vulnerable to pedophiles and human trafficking. The pair wrote, quote, Meta's platforms have been consciously designed to prioritize profit over the protection of its most vulnerable users, our children. Though the new active location feature can be adjusted and turned off, the lawmakers say the parental controls are tricky to navigate, and some have reported that their location was shared without consent. The senators are urging Zuckerberg to end the new map feature. A Meta spokesperson told Axios that the map feature is off by default and location is never shared unless the user turns it on. Australia is the latest country to say it will recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. The country is joining a growing list of Western allies as international condemnation and anger builds over Israel's actions in Gaza.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the decision came after receiving commitments from the Palestinian Authority that Hamas would have no role in a future government. He called the two-state solution humanity's best hope to end violence, suffering, and starvation in Gaza. The announcement drew sharp criticism from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He called the move disappointing and shameful. Qatari news outlet Al Jazeera says an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City killed one of its journalists last night. Israel's military says Anas al-Sharif was a Hamas terrorist cell leader involved in rocket attacks, citing seized documents as proof. Al Jazeera strongly rejects those allegations, calling the attack a premeditated attempt to silence reporting from Gaza. Press freedom groups say Israel has not provided credible evidence linking al-Sharif to Hamas. Over to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday defended his nation's planned military takeover of the Gaza Strip. He says Israel has no choice but to complete the job and defeat Hamas, given the terror group's refusal to lay down its arms.
The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas, lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will have overriding security responsibility. A security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel.
Netanyahu says the goal is not to occupy Gaza, but rather to free it from Hamas terrorists. The Israeli Prime Minister said Israel is working to increase aid distribution in a humanitarian surge. He invited more countries to join in the efforts of the Israeli army with humanitarian aid drops. President Trump and Netanyahu spoke by phone yesterday to discuss the planned Israeli operation. The Israeli Security Cabinet approved the plans last week. An explosion at a U.S. steel plant near Pittsburgh has left dozens injured or trapped under the rubble. Rescue efforts are underway after the blast killed one person and left two unaccounted for. Emergency services said a fire at the plant started this morning. The plant is considered the largest coking operation in North America. The facility is one of four major U.S. steel plants in Pennsylvania that employ several thousand workers. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro posted on X saying he and his wife were praying for the Clairton community. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman called the explosion absolutely tragic and vowed to support steel workers in the aftermath. Coming up, will President Trump's latest efforts to reduce crime make a meaningful impact? We discuss the issue with the panel. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight. Skylar, come here. Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Where did the time go? Somehow I lost all those years. Where did the time go? I don't know how I got here. Or how did I get here? I can see now.
You've done the hard part. You quit smoking. Now do the easy part and get scanned for lung cancer. If you smoked, you may still be at risk, but early detection could save your life. Talk to your doctor and learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Materials about Beijing's treatment of ethnic minorities has been removed from an exhibit of one of Thailand's top art galleries. All these at China's request. That's according to its curator and communications seen by Reuters. The artists say it's Beijing's latest attempt to silence critics overseas. Here's more.
We were quite shocked.
Tsai, a Myanmar artist and the exhibit's co-curator, said Chinese embassy staff, accompanied by Bangkok city officials, entered the exhibition 3 days after it opened and demanded it be shut down.
It is such an ironic thing because this exhibition is all about the network of authoritarian regimes. And then while it is exhibiting, the network of authoritarian regimes are working together to shut this exhibition down.
When Reuters visited the Bangkok Arts and Cultural Center, some works previously advertised and photographed had been removed. Others had been altered, with the words Hong Kong, Tibet, and Uyghur redacted, along with the names of the artists.
So we fled before midnight, and on 27, 8:30 a.m., we landed in London.
Tsai said he was speaking from overseas, where he fled after Thai police sought to find him. In a July 30th email seen by Reuters, the gallery said due to pressure from the Chinese embassy, quote, "We have been warned that the exhibition may risk creating diplomatic tensions between Thailand and China." The email added that the gallery had, quote, "no choice but to make certain adjustments, such as obscuring the names of the Hong Kong, Tibetan, and Uyghur artists." Several days later, Tsai said the embassy demanded further removals. The Chinese embassy in Bangkok, the foreign ministry in Beijing, and Thailand's foreign ministry did not respond to multiple requests for comment. The Bangkok Metropolitan Administration referred Reuters to the gallery, which did not respond to an email seeking comment. An exhibit representative said the team had agreed not to comment on the issue. Beijing has denied allegations by rights groups that China carries out a sophisticated campaign of harassment against critics overseas that has often extended into the art world.
Tensions on the high seas. The Philippines reports that Chinese Coast Guard ships chased and blocked its Coast Guard and fishing vessels today in the Scarborough Shoal. The contested waters are a rich fishing area in the South China Sea off the northwestern Philippines. It's the latest flare-up of long-simmering territorial disputes in the busy waterway. Philippine authorities say a Chinese Coast Guard ship accidentally collided with a Chinese Navy ship while chasing a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. The Philippines says the Chinese Coast Guard ship sustained substantial damage. China seized the Scarborough Shoal in 2012 and has since restricted access to Filipino fishermen. A 2016 ruling by an international court found that most Chinese claims in the South China Sea were invalid, but Beijing has refused to abide by it. Reaction from the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He said Philippines ships defending its territorial interests in the South China Sea would never back down and would stand their ground in the contested waters. Marcos recently said his country would inevitably be drawn kicking and screaming into any war over Taiwan. This due to its proximity to the self-ruled island and the presence of large numbers of Filipino workers there. China accused Marcos of playing with fire over the comments.
We do not want any kind of confrontation with anyone. We want to build a better, stronger, freer, safer Philippines. That's what we are working for. This kind of confrontation does not build a stronger, better Philippines. All it does is continue to defend our country. So that's I'm a little bit perplexed why it would be characterized as such, as playing with fire.
And a 7-year-old American citizen is banned from leaving China. Now, Asian San Francisco-based advocacy group is asking Beijing to lift the exit ban on him. His name is Gao Jia. Gao has been banned from coming back to the U.S. for 1 year. Chinese authorities arrested his father last year on a family trip to China. The father is a dissident artist known for creating artwork mocking the Chinese Communist Party leadership. Both the father and mother are green card holders. The Dui Hua Foundation, a human rights advocacy group in San Francisco, said the 7-year-old Gao has been unable to attend school for a full year. Beijing imposes exit bans on Americans traveling to China at will. Just last month, the regime barred a Wells Fargo executive from leaving China, accusing him of being involved in a criminal case. The foundation estimated last year that over 30 Americans are under China's exit bans. A senior Chinese diplomat has reportedly been arrested. Liu Jianchao was widely seen as a potential foreign minister. He has reportedly been taken away by authorities after returning from a work trip overseas in late July. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, citing people familiar with the matter. Fluent in English and seen as more friendly toward the West, Liu is widely seen as a potential foreign minister. He's also seen as someone who could take part in talks between the U.S. and China. Liu was in a group meeting with then Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. last year. In China, he serves as the head of the Communist Party's International Department, an agency overseeing relations with foreign states. It's unclear why Liu was taken away. His most recent public visits were to Singapore, South Africa, and Algeria. Liu's detention marks the highest-level disappearance of a diplomat since China ousted its former foreign minister, Qin Gang, in 2023. Last month, Liu said he was optimistic about the future of U.S.-China relations and that it was unimaginable that China and the U.S. will ever go to war. And earlier today, President Trump, in a press briefing, announced that he is federalizing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He is invoking Section 740 of the Home Rule Act in D.C. to do this. And joining us now to discuss is Robin Biro, Democratic strategist and former Obama Regional Campaign Director. Also joining us is Hadley Manning, Executive Vice President and Fellow at the Steamboat Institute. So first of all, good afternoon to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. Hadley, I'll start with you today. Can I get your first reactions to everything that's transpired this morning with President Trump calling this Liberation Day in D.C.?
Of course, the relationship between Washington, D.C. and the federal government is unique. It's not like the relationship between other states or cities and the federal government. And I emphasize the term federal government because it's not just the president who matters here, but also Congress. Congress delegated a lot of local authority to the city and city council, the mayor of Washington, D.C., back when Richard Nixon was in office. And this was the beginning of what we call home rule for Washington, D.C. Now, the president does have authority over the National Guard. And what he's doing here is not accurately really described as a federal takeover of Washington, D.C., but it is a takeover of the D.C. police force. And it is a measure meant to underscore crime rates, homelessness, some of the local challenges of living in Washington, D.C. And ultimately, I think this is a political message, not just to Washington, D.C., but to many Democrats who control most of the most populous cities in the United States and almost all of the cities that have some of the highest crime rates in the country. So this is a safety and security message that President Trump is trying to make good on. He's talked about taking over Washington, D.C. in many of his campaign promises and speeches, and now he's emphasizing that he's not going to tolerate the crime rates in Washington, D.C., and I think it's meant to send a message across the country as well.
Okay, Robin, what do you think? What stood out to you today?
What stood out to me is that the police department in D.C. has been working really hard to curtail crime. You can look at FBI crime stats. I pulled them right here. I've got them right here. Violent crime is down by 26% over the last 10 years. Homicide is down by 12%. And assault with a deadly weapon is down by 20%. I think this is a slight to the hard work that our men and women in blue are doing and have been doing in D.C. to lower the crime rate. However, Hadley is exactly correct. President Trump has a unique position there because there is no governor of D.C. President Trump directly controls the National Guard for D.C., so he's within his right to do this. I think it sends the wrong message. My friends on the left are calling this a distraction from the Epstein files. Of course they would say that.
Okay, Hadley, can I get your reaction to what Robin is saying in terms of data, that violent crime is down 26%, total crime is down 7%, and this is also according to police department data, the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. Is there a need for federal involvement?
Well, certainly you can look at data from the last few years and see that the trend in Washington, D.C. and some other major cities is encouraging. And a lot of that is a fall off from extremely high rates that we saw during the COVID pandemic and immediately following the COVID pandemic. So I would take a lot of the data from the most recent years, especially the trend line, with a grain of salt. I would look back further. I'd look back at the trend in homicides, for example, in Washington, D.C., and we see that in 2024, that homicide rate, after coming down for several years, after 2020, 2021, when it got very high, still higher than what we saw in 2019, 2018, and years preceding the COVID pandemic. So yes, the trends may be encouraging specifically when we look at the most recent years, but Washington, D.C. still has a very high homicide rate when compared to other parts of the country, higher than most other major cities. The carjackings in Washington, D.C. are 3 times the national average. So it stands out. Unfortunately, I mean, this is a city that so many of us love, and of course we all love and admire and appreciate the hard work of Washington, D.C.'s police force, but it is a problem. It is a city that all of us, Democrats, Republicans, Americans, should be proud of and should feel like we can safely visit without fear of crime or having our property stolen. And that's, I think, what President Trump is trying to address here. Again, I think the message is not just for Washington, D.C. residents, it's for people across the country. If you look at our top 30 cities when it comes to crime rate, 27 of those are Democrat controlled. So these local government issues, safety issues are very difficult, I think, for Republicans and Democrats alike. But this will be an interesting experiment to see if President Trump's tough on crime approach and the National Guard's involvement here will be effective at combating what's been a very difficult problem for the city for a long time.
So Robin, what do you say to that point where the crime rate, even though it's down a little bit compared to previous years, that it's still very high? And President Trump also highlighted this point in that press briefing, saying that the murder rate is higher than compared to Mexico City.
Yeah, and I can look. I'm glad you asked. I've got statistics right here. The crime rate in D.C. is 3.8 people per 1,000. I can just say that in Republican states, Louisiana, Johnson's state is 6.2, South Dakota, Thune state, 2.7, South Carolina, Lindsey Graham state, 4.7, Florida, Marco Rubio, 3.8. These are all higher than the crime rates that we're experiencing right now in D.C. So I reject the premise that this is just blue states. I think that this is a problem nationwide. We have to do something about crime. This is not a red state or blue state or red city or blue city issue. Crime affects us all. And we do have to do something. Now, I reject wholeheartedly the option of rounding up our nation's homeless, and especially in D.C., and because it's just inhumane to me. This is also illegal. This has been tried in states that I've lived in, at cities that I've lived in. This was tried in Columbia, South Carolina, for example. It failed. It was deemed to be unconstitutional. They were detained without cause. It happened right here in Tucker, Georgia. Same thing. They were rounded up. They were detained without cause. This is not how this is done, and this is not how we treat human beings in this country.
Okay, Hadley, I was going to talk about the homeless situation a little bit later in the interview, but since Robin brought it up, what do you think? I mean, is moving the homeless, as Trump put it, far away from the Capitol, is that just shifting the problem?
Well, of course it's shifting the problem, right? It's literally physically moving the problem. I think, for visitors to the nation's capital, many of whom are tourists, this is not just about safety and security. Obviously, it's also about what President Trump is calling beautification. It's about removing some of the people who are experiencing homelessness, literally removing them and moving them to different areas. And other cities, other states, Democrat controlled, Republican control, as Robin mentioned, have tried similar measures. Ultimately, homelessness is a very difficult problem to address. It is one that is mixed with several other problems, including mental health, including drugs, and including substance abuse. So there's a lot to unpack here. However, I don't believe that any resident or visitor to Washington, D.C. wants to be walking around encampments, be walking around areas where, it is not necessarily the right of anyone to pitch a tent in the middle of a public park or public sidewalk. These are rights and these are areas where we have to find balance, and we have to talk about it's also the public's right and the public's ability to enjoy our national monuments, our national capitals, our sidewalks and areas that are meant to be for the public's use and enjoyment. There's a proper use of those spaces and there's an improper use. It's not meant to be someone's home. It's not supposed to be somewhere where someone lives. Now, addressing the root causes of why people are putting up tents and why people are trying to make sidewalks into their homes is a much deeper, much harder issue. But in terms of making certain areas off limits and enforcing camping bans, for example, I think President Trump and others are within their prerogative to say this area is for the enjoyment of the entire public. It is not supposed to be someone's home. It's supposed to be a sidewalk. It's supposed to be our nation's Capitol building. It's supposed to be a monument. It's supposed to be something that we look at and we say, we all own this. This belongs to all of us, and we can all enjoy it. It's not meant to be a place where you park and stay.
Okay, Robin, I want to get your response, but I also want to ask you, how do you think Trump's latest move is going to affect relations between D.C. Officials as well as local leadership?
There's a problem here because it's going to seem like he's overstepping the boundaries. And one thing that I love about Republicans is that they talk about states' rights, and I respect that. It's one thing I respect and admire about Republicans. But I will see this as sort of trouncing some of those right now. And I think my party will probably be fairly criticizing that. However, Adley's exactly correct. The homelessness issue is, there are root causes. There's addiction, there's mental health concerns. All of those need to be addressed. And we need to look and see what's worked in other places and pick what works and disregard what doesn't work. It's a complicated and nuanced issue. There's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution for the entire country. This needs to be handled by municipalities.
Okay, Hadley, since we're talking about root causes, do you think Trump's plans, including deploying the National Guard in D.C. as well as DEA and the FBI, does that strike at the root cause of why crime is happening in the city?
Well, I think crime is a separate issue from homelessness, right? So yes, they often run together, and we do see, unfortunately, people experiencing homelessness can commit crimes, but they can also be victims of crime. However, if we step aside from the homelessness issue and focus purely on crime, violent crime, property crime, yes, I do think that when President Trump uses his political messaging, his bully pulpit as President of the United States, as the commander of our military and the director of our National Guard, when he steps in to this degree, it will send a message that Washington, D.C. is no longer going to tolerate crime. It's no longer going to tolerate violence, and no longer going to it's not going to tolerate the destruction of property. That will send a message to people within the Washington, D.C. area. I do believe that tough on crime policies, having more officers, whether they are D.C. police officers or members of our military, members of our National Guard, that having the presence of more officers on more corners in Washington, D.C. will be helpful. You can look at other experiments with different policing strategies, but certainly having more people in uniform will be helpful. And I think the Washington, D.C. police force, maybe they feel miffed that the National Guard is stepping in here, but maybe they also feel like they're welcome to have this kind of backup, to have more officers and more people helping them in their ultimate mission, which is to keep the public safe.
Robin, same question to you. What do you think? Is it going to deter crime?
I'm not really sure. That will remain to be seen. But there's one thing that we're not talking about is there's a beautification component of this. That's something that I actually do agree with the president on. He's using this as a means to upgrade and renovate some of the existing infrastructure and buildings. And that I'm all for. So, let's, like I said, take the good, leave the bad.
Okay, Hadley, do you think a hypothetical federal takeover of D.C., would it make the city safer in the long run?
Well, it would certainly change a lot about the city of Washington, D.C., and I think most residents and voters in Washington, D.C. wouldn't appreciate a federal takeover. However, it is, again, to get back to what I said at the beginning, it is not purely the choice of President Trump. He would have to have legislation go through both houses of Congress, including meeting a 60-vote threshold in the Senate, to undo some of the devolution of powers that took place when Nixon was in office during the initiation of the Home Rule Project. So yes, it could be done. It's not outside of the constitutional, it's not outside of what is possible, certainly legally, but it's not something that will happen in one day with the snap of President Trump's fingers. It's not something as simple as moving in the National Guard, but it would be something that would ultimately affect the city, not just in terms of public safety, but in terms of all of the decisions that are made by people who live in Washington, D.C. And those decisions, rather than being made at the local level with a city council and a mayor, would be moved back to congressional oversight, would be something that Congress would get to decide.
Okay, Robin, we can pretty much wrap up this conversation now. Any final thoughts?
I just want to make sure that we do not criminalize our nation's homeless. Every time that's been tried, it has been a very bad thing, especially for Republicans headed to the midterms.
Well, all right then. Thank you both for coming on. Hadley, Robin, pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, President Trump previewing his upcoming meeting with President Vladimir Putin of Russia, what he says about the future of Ukraine's territory. Stay tuned.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50 enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. Try America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. A young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
The magical painting.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
President Trump today saying he'll discuss Russia-Ukraine land swapping in his upcoming meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us. Jack, good afternoon. What did the president say regarding a potential deal?
Good afternoon, Don. Well, Trump said that he'll tell Putin whether that it is time to end the war with Ukraine, and they'll discuss dividing up land as well, and that he'll know within the first 2 minutes of this meeting whether or not Putin will agree to a deal, and if not, then fighting will continue. Following that meeting, Trump said that he'll call Ukrainian President Zelensky and other European allies to discuss the next steps. And Trump added that he'll later arrange a meeting between both Putin and Zelensky in person to solve the situation. Here's Trump earlier today.
I'm going to meet with President Putin, and we're going to see what he has in mind. And if it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders, and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first, and then I'll call them after. And I may say, lots of luck, keep fighting, or I may say we can make a deal.
Now, as for the swapping of territories, that's something that Ukrainian President Zelensky has strongly opposed. But in this war, Russia has occupied very key locations of Ukraine. Trump says that he was bothered by Zelensky's recent comments about the hurdles that it would take to get to a deal. Take a look.
And I get along with Zelensky, but, you know, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. But I'll be speaking to Zelensky. The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap, because there'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody, to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad. But it's very complex because you have lines that are very uneven, and there'll be some swapping, there'll be some changes in land, and the word that they will use is, you know, they make changes. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
Now, Trump said that Putin invited him to meet and that it was respectful of him to agree to come to the U.S. for their meeting on Friday in Alaska rather than in Russia or a third country. Now, Trump has threatened secondary tariffs on Russia's trading partners if a deal isn't reached. We see that by the end of the month, the U.S. will have a 50% tariff on India, which purchases large amounts of Russian oil despite sanctions. And we have China, who's Russia's largest purchaser of oil, about almost 50% of Russia's oil. It's an act that Trump calls fueling the war machine. Don?
Now, Jack, Trump also confirmed that Nvidia will be giving the U.S. government a 15% cut of its sales to China. Why is the company doing that?
That's right. Just to reiterate, Trump confirmed Nvidia will pay the federal government 15% of their revenue from semiconductor sales to China. And in exchange, Trump is granting Nvidia export licenses to sell what are known as H20 chips in China. H20 chips are not as high tech as the newer models, but there is a market for them. Here's the president on his conversation with Nvidia's CEO, Jensen Huang.
So I said, listen, I want 20% if I'm going to approve this for you, for the country, for our country, for the U.S. I don't want it myself. You know, every time I say like 747, I want, yeah, for the Air Force. So I just wanted, so when I say I want 20, I want for the country. I only care about the country. I don't care about myself. And he said, would you make it 15? So we negotiated a little deal.
The art of the deal, bringing it from 20% to 15%. Trump added that he's not allowing Nvidia to sell its most advanced Blackwell chip to China, but it's possible that he could in the future. So it's just the H20 chip right now. Those discussions about a Blackwell chip could come up as part of an overall trade deal between the U.S. and China, because President Trump's pause on reciprocal tariffs on China end tomorrow. That's if a deadline isn't reached. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick last week said that it is likely that it will be extended another 90 days, although he's not on the team to negotiate with China on this. That's Jamieson Greer. But if this isn't reached, tariffs on Chinese goods would be at over 80% as of tomorrow. Don.
All right, Jack, thank you very much. Coming up, the CEO of Intel will meet President Trump at the White House today. How the CEO's alleged ties to China come into play. Find out more after the break.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega.